days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from offseason to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show, and we're going to be talking all about free agents around the NFL that the 49ers may be interested in. We know they got free agents in their own running back room, like Raheem Mostert, that they might want to retain. But what happens if Raheem Mostert is gone, or even if Raheem Mostert stays, but they would like to improve the room even more? I think there's a lot of players that we can talk about, Alex, and I'm excited to get into it.
Including a name at the very end of this episode that you're not going to want to miss. A big name, a potential trade option that actually has legs, and none of this nonsensical Christian McCaffrey trades that we've been hearing a lot about, eating up $18 million with the cap space. That trade, completely unlikely, but there is another name, another trade possibility that we're going to talk about at the end of this video, so make sure you stick around. Subscribe right now if you haven't already. Hit that like button, and let's get into this thing. And who's the first name on your list of free agents that the 49ers could target the running back position?
I think one that just screams and makes the most sense is Cordarrelle Patterson. The way that Kyle Shanahan used Deebo Samuel this year, and then you have a guy that can do a lot of the similar things. He plays in the backfield, but he's a receiver by trade. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. What you don't know, though, is how much money they would have to pay him. Kyle Shanahan said during the year that he's been trying to get Cordarrelle Patterson for a few years now. So if somebody's definitely interested in, they'll be interested in bringing him to San Francisco. The question is, what kind of money can he get on the open market? If he can get a big enough contract, I assume he'll go somewhere else because the 49ers are going to have a lot of money to spend in the running back room. However, if he thinks that for some reason he can play for Kyle Shanahan for 1 year, have a similar meteoric rise that Deebo Samuel did, maybe be used in a variety of different ways, both catching the ball and then also running the ball in the backfield, he might be willing for that marriage to happen and then go ahead and cash out next year. We'll see, though. It all depends on what his aim is. Is he trying to win a Super Bowl? Is he trying to make more money down the road? Or is he looking to cash out now? If he's looking to cash out now, San Francisco will not be the location for Cordarrelle Patterson. But you never know. I think they're going to kick the tires on this. He's somebody to keep an eye on because he does fit what Kyle Shanahan likes to do with this type of player.
Here's the other thing, too, that you have to remember, or try and keep in mind with Cordarrelle Patterson is there are not a lot of teams right now in the league that utilize players the way Kyle Shanahan has used players and the way that he was utilized last year in Atlanta. There may not be a huge, gigantic market for this type of player. Now, that being said, Ant, there are a lot of Kyle Shanahan coaching tree people out there who are looking for players like this as well. So maybe there is a market that we're not thinking about or that just hasn't made itself apparent yet. PFF has his value at about $6 million a year for the first 2 year, basically $12 million contract, 2 years, $6 million. Over the Cap has it at $9.1 million per year for about a 3-year deal is what they think he can sign for right now. Guy is in his 30s. He's getting up there. You know, he may have 2 or 3 really good, coming into his peak before that twilight starts to hit and he starts to lose a step or two, or maybe before health stuff starts to catch back up with him. It really just depends, right? What does he want to do? He could sign a little bit of a longer term deal and get some money. That's fine, but you may not be playing for a contender. And when you're getting into your late 30s, mid 30s, you may not have as big of an impact and a role with some of these teams, be able to do the dynamic things that he can do now, which make him so special. So do you want to make that money right now, or do you want to try and strike while the iron's hot, win a Super Bowl, and maybe even inflate those numbers a little bit more? Because if you were able to do that with Atlanta last year, imagine what Kyle Shanahan can do with you in San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan's already talked about wanting to get this guy in. It's a marriage that makes sense, but it's obviously going to have to make sense at the right price because you're not going to overpay for this guy with as many names as there are out there in free agency. And one of the next ones that we could talk about that is a speedy, kind of shifty guy that would kind of fit the system a little bit would be Phillip Lindsay, who has had success in a lot of different areas. Struggled the last few years, really getting his feet settled in someplace and having success in the running back room. But if there's any place, Ant, where running backs somehow magically redefine careers, bounce back in huge ways, go from absolute nobodies to somebodies, San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan are kind of the place to be. And Phillip Lindsay has the speed and the dynamic stuff as a zone runner that it could make sense. And also maybe catching the ball out of the backfield, playing a little bit more of a third down roll back would definitely be an upgrade over someone like JaMychal Hasty.
I think he's dynamite in this system. I think he fits the system perfectly. He was somebody I was super excited about possibly getting last year. Of course, he chose to go to the Houston Texans. They ultimately traded him. He did not fit what they wanted to do, but he fits what Kyle Shanahan likes to do. You put him behind a good run-first offensive line, I think, yeah, he could have some big-time plays. He's a little bit of a change-up from what you get from Elijah Mitchell, but he's still a one-cut-and-go guy. But there's a lot of explosiveness there. He's exciting. He's an exciting player, and I think he would fit very good in Kyle Shanahan's system. And I also believe that he would, it would kind of take his career back to the next level. I think right now he's kind of one of those guys in the middle where I think he would like to take himself to one of the top-level guys so that way he could get a big paycheck. So I think he would fit in San Francisco. I definitely would like him to be the addition to this room. I think it all too depends on what what happens with Raheem Mostert. If Raheem Mostert decides to go to another suitor, Miami breaks the bank for him and he leaves, then someone like Phillip Lindsay makes a lot of sense because you want somebody that has that top end speed, and Lindsay's definitely got whole shot top end speed. He's not Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert is faster than any other running back in the league, and it's not even close. But you need to make sure you have guys that fit the system, and this guy does it. This guy's a veteran. Like you said, he knows how to play on third down. So what you could do is bring him and Elijah Mitchell together where they could, man all the downs. Then you wouldn't have to have a third down back that is, kind of alone in that way. JaMychal Hasty's kind of been the third down back that had Jerick McKinnon when he was actually healthy. But I don't think that, Kyle Shanahan needs to have a third down back if he has other guys that can do it all the other downs as well.
You're not wrong there, Ant. And look, you got to save money in some places. Yep. You can't necessarily have, guys just sitting around the roster eating up league minimum salaries. And this is a guy, like you said, going to be going into his fifth year in the league. Vet guy is going to be making around that minimum, that $1.5 million is where that number is kind of going to be for him. And he doesn't really have a market value kind of set anywhere. PFF doesn't have him in their top 200 of ranked free agents over the cap and spot track. And a lot of these places, Ant, aren't really putting a lot of value on Phillip Lindsay, which means this is a guy who you could get on that bare minimum money and, maybe have some incentives built in on a 1-year deal to see if it's a kind of a prove it sort of thing. And, this could be a long-term option down the road. Like if you're able to get him in this year, pay him cheap. And if he blows up and has a good run this year in this season, maybe he wants to stick around, especially with Bobby Turner coming back in 2023, actually getting to work with him instead of whatever they're going to do. And most likely Anthony Lynn is going to be the guy who's handling the running backs this year. So we're going to see. We'll see what happens with this. It does make sense. It could very well be a cheap option for the 49ers. But speaking of Raheem Mostert, I think this is a good thing that you just talked about it and just brought this up. This could be the B option if Raheem Mostert isn't necessarily good to go, because there are other ways you could address having another running back who can split up the carries and share some of the load that maybe you wouldn't want to put on Lindsay necessarily in that role right now as he's trying to get familiar and comfortable with the system. But Raheem Mostert is a viable option that it could work for. And again, a guy who's going to be making near the bottom end of what the salary is going to be because of the injury history, because of the fact that, it's such a risk with him. He hasn't played a full year since the 2019 season. He just hasn't been on the field, hasn't been available. His body hasn't held up. However, all of those negatives, all of that risk that with Raheem Mostert, you already know what the rewards are if you're a 49ers fan. You've seen him, right? You saw the 2019 season. You saw the way he exploded onto the scene. You see the speed. We saw it in training camp in the joint practices with the Chargers, right? Coming downhill, cuts to the left, gets to the outside, and no one's touching this man. There is not a running back like Raheem Mostert in this league, and you're not going to find one coming out in this draft either, because the running backs coming out this year are not speedy. No,
I think that there's, a lot to be said about this guy's ability. I think that John Lynch has talked about that, the risk and reward. The question is somebody going to be taking a bigger risk? If you have a team like Miami that has over $60 million in cap space, they might be willing to throw $3, $4, $5 extra $1 million Raheem Mostert's way in the hopes that he can give him, the dynamic ability to completely change the offense, because that dynamic ability changes the offense. The runs that he had at the beginning of the season, against the Cardinals and then against the Jets in 2020 were dynamic plays. And you were looking at, what he could bring to this offense and thinking, wow, this 49ers offense is absolutely explosive in the run game. Usually teams are explosive in the pass game. Now, I think the 49ers are going to make a concerted effort to bring Raheem Mostert back, because one thing you can do to make Trey Lance more dynamic in your offense is to give him a dynamic running back. We know Elijah Mitchell can continually carry, 15, 20 times a game. I think that's the number you want to keep him at. You could get Raheem Mostert to the 10 to 15 area, and you're running the ball, 30 times with those guys, and you sprinkle in another back for another 5 to 7. I think you're liking where you're at. But you need that dynamic nature of Raheem Mostert. And if you don't have that dynamic, Raheem Mostert ability, you got to find another way. Last year, the Niners had to turn to Deebo Samuel to get those dynamic plays. They're hoping they can fill that role. If it's Raheem Mostert, then everything's good to go and everything's gravy. If it's not, then you have to find one of these other guys, whether it's Phillip Lindsay or somebody else.
Cutback crew, though, let us know down below right now in the comment section what it is you would want to pay for Raheem Mostert if you wanted him back. And if you don't want him back, then obviously don't bother to comment, because for you it's a no, just not doing it. Instead, leave another name that you'd rather have, maybe other than Phillip Lindsay, other than Raheem Mostert in this category. And but look, PFF has the number at about 1.75 million, I think is what it is roughly.
Wow.
1.25 million guaranteed on that
Miami's
contract.
going to offer more than that.
You got to think so, right? You got to think they're going to be offering close to 3.
I'm thinking Miami's going to offer $4 to $5 million.
You think so?
For Raheem Mostert, yeah.
You think it'll be the base salary?
Yeah.
They do have the money to spend.
They have the money. They can overpay. They have that luxury to overpay.
They do have the luxury to overpay right now.
The question is, can the 49ers get it close enough where they're like, hey, you can go to a new system.
And help rebuild.
Yeah.
And all that fun stuff.
Or you can stay here. We have a championship winning roster right now.
And you can be a key piece in that.
Yeah. So I think that is, I mean, the other part you got to remember is they can also reach out to him because he's a leader on this football team.
Accurate.
And say, look, Bobby Turner's not going to be here. We need to lean on you this year. You can kind of count, draw on him that way as well. Maybe use that to your advantage. But I do think that they need to do everything they can to bring it back. It's just at what cost? Because I do think Miami's going to go big on him.
I don't disagree with you, and I think they will. I don't know if the Jets will as much. I think you and I both thought that they might. Last year, they did not make any sort of move or play or had any sort of idea of wanting that. So, look, I think at the end of the day, this is what it's going to be. I think those are the two teams that are contenders right now, San Francisco and the Dolphins, in terms of paying this man, a little bit more than maybe what teams would want to pay him right now just because of the injury history. Those are your two front runners. We'll see which team comes out ahead.
One thing to keep in mind, Miami might also go the Cordarrelle Patterson route.
They very well
if
could.
They do, that might price them out of Raheem Mostert.
Good.
So we could actually, if you had your choice between Cordarrelle Patterson or Raheem Mostert, who would you choose?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, because that would give McDaniel a lot of flexibility in his offense. He could have somebody that could do Debo-ish things. You could also run a 4 wide receiver set, right, or a 5 wide receiver set with him, bring him back in the backfield. There's a lot more flexibility that way with Cordarrelle Patterson than with Raheem Mostert, but you lose the explosivity.
It's true, you do lose the explosivity. If I had a choice, I probably would go Raheem Mostert.
I would too.
I think it's a cheaper option, number one, and you already know what he can do in the system, whereas Cordarrelle Patterson, you have an idea of what he can do in the system, but it's going to cost you a lot more.
Well, I already have a better Cordarrelle Patterson. His name's Debo Samuel.
Also accurate.
So I don't need to add another one if I already got one, because I'd rather have the explosiveness. Now, if I could have both, that's
if I can have my cake and eat it too, then we'll do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, give me the explosivity.
Bingo,
bango, bongo, Ant. And now let's talk about two former 49er running backs, Ant. Yes, that's right, folks. We're going to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
To the 2019 season, where we had a couple guys who did some wonderful things for us, especially early in that season. And the first one up, Tevin Coleman, a very familiar name. Didn't really do much with the Jets last year. Really not a great year. A lot of people feel like maybe the tires are falling off and coming off there for Tevin Coleman. And but because of that means it's probably going to be a fairly cheap contract. He made $1.1 million last year. You got to think it's going to be right around that number again this upcoming season in terms of what Tevin Coleman can make, around that $1.25 million range for veteran running backs. He's 28 years old. And the tires really have fallen off this much that this man can't have a role or an impact with the 49ers?
I mean, they could have. But one thing we've seen about Kyle Shanahan, he likes to bring players back that played for him.
True.
You see Mohamed Sanu come back, and even that was even after he had given up on Mohamed Sanu the year before. So he will bring guys back and put them back into the rotation if it's cheap and if it's something that he needs. So if he feels that Tevin Coleman's going to give him something, he might bring him back. It might be one of the cases where you bring Tevin Coleman back, you see what he's got, you put him on your 90-man roster, and see if he can make this team. Because I do think they want to insulate themselves against what happened last year, where they just really got into it, where they were struggling. So, I mean, if you're coming back with Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon only, and JaMychal Hasty, you might look to improve with a couple other guys. But bring in some veterans, see what they got. Maybe Tevin Coleman's that guy. That won't make 49er fans happy. 49er fans definitely did not like Tevin Coleman. I have no problems with a guy that gets 3 or 4 yards to carry, but a lot of people do. So I think he would be nothing more than a depth piece, somebody that you would be looking at 3rd or 4th on your depth chart. But that would be something they would have to determine. He wouldn't be my first choice, but I could see that being a possibility. But I think it's more on the outside looking in.
It's definitely on the outside looking in, but it makes sense in terms of comfortability and depth. Making sure that you have enough room going into this upcoming season where, you don't run into the same issues you had this year where, Raheem Mostert goes down, the guys behind, Trey Sermon goes down, and all you're stuck with is Elijah Mitchell, and then Elijah Mitchell goes down, and it's like, huh? What are we doing? Who is this backfield? Why are we calling on practice squad players? You're going to do everything that you possibly can to give yourself depth. and add some depth then. JaMycal Hasty showed that he didn't stay healthy. That's back-to-back seasons now where he's missed time with injury. Yes, this year wasn't a significant injury. The previous year was, but he still missed time when you needed him to. Trey Sermon didn't look like the back a lot of people thought he was going to be. So if you're the Niners, yeah, make sure you go add depth. Make sure you kick the tires on everything that you got to kick the tires on. And if you got to bring in some cheap options who know your system, who have shown they can run well in your system, do it and make them compete with these young guys and see where they come out and pan out because they may surprise you. Listen, Tevin Coleman making the roster wouldn't be a surprise to me if he got signed and made the active roster. The surprise would be if he was the lead back going into next season, which barring injury to, the running backs we currently have is not going to be the case.
Yeah.
So Grant Cohn, take a deep breath. It's going to be A-OK, Thanos. You're not going to have to worry about Tevin Coleman being the guy who gets 10 carries for 3 to 4 yards at a time and you losing your mind out in front of Levi's in training camp. I remember those videos. They made me chuckle a lot.
It's all about improving. You're looking to improve every single position. So this is one of those things where last year they brought in Wayne Gallman, to compete because you're looking at getting the best possible guys out there. Now Elijah Mitchell took a huge step forward during training camp and everything, and everyone saw how good he could be. But in the same regard, you're going to do the same thing. And could Tevin Coleman be better than JaMycal Hasty? Yeah, he could. Could Tevin Coleman be better than Trey Sermon? Yeah, he could. We don't know
right now.
We don't know what Trey Sermon is going to end up developing into. So
accurate.
Making sure that you have that depth, especially if Raheem Mostert leaves, that's why he's somebody that you at least got to keep on your radar. It doesn't mean that we're saying, hey, this needs to happen. We should get this guy. But it's somebody that whenever you have ties to Kyle Shanahan, you have to keep an eye on it.
Accurate, and another guy with ties to Kyle Shanahan is Matt Breida, the Cheetah. The Cheetah is fast. The guy is explosive. And he gets out in open space, he takes off and he's gone. This is a guy who a lot of people were stunned when the Niners actually dealt him away and traded him away. He really hasn't done anything since he left San Francisco. There were some injury concerns. There's the fumbling issue with him while he was in San Francisco with the Niners. It's going to be a cheap option because he hasn't been able to do anything. He's going to be coming in on a minimum salary. He's 27 years old. The speed is still there. I've seen it. Seen him in games breaking away and things of that nature. Look, I think this is one that's kind of slept on that actually might make sense for San Francisco as a third down kind of change of pace back.
It does. It also makes sense because they had such a hard time finding kick returners last year.
Accurate.
So you bring Matt Breida in, he's got a wonderful excitement with his speed. So you could bring him in, and now you have a guy that can take it to the house every single time he touches the ball. You don't have to worry about putting Deebo Samuel back there. So I think he's somebody to keep an eye on. That speed is something you can't replicate. It's the same thing with Raheem Mostert. Now, if you have Mostert on the team, Matt Breida is a less likely option. But I think if Mostert leaves, you do want to make sure you have a dynamic speed guy, whether that's Phillip Lindsay, Matt Breida, something like that, because you can see what happens to this 49ers run game when you don't have that speed on the edge. Because not only does Kyle Shanahan want to run the outside zone, which, you need to be fast, but you don't have to be, blitzkrieg fast, but he wants to run these outside toss plays. And a lot of times that pursuit is able to get there from the backside when you have a slower runner. When you have somebody like Raheem Mostert, he puts pressure on these guys to beat angles. He puts pressure on DBs, to abandon and go where they need to go, which ends up setting up the gap scheme and the counters and the reverses later. There's a lot of things that play into this. The 49ers need to make sure they have that dynamic avenue. And I don't think they have a running back in the draft. Maybe somebody is going to, end up surprising us and being a guy that, could do that sort of thing. But last year there was speed in the draft. This year, not so much of the speed avenue. I think the 49ers need to address it in free agency.
You're not wrong, man. They do. They have to address it in free agency, and Breida does that, and he's going to do it on the cheap. Another guy that you're going to be able to bring in for that $1.25 million base kind of base range. He's not going to cost you a whole heck of a lot, and you already know what he can do in the system. The question is can he continue to develop as a running back? Can he be the change of pace you need? And can he stay healthy? If he can do those things, then this makes sense. And it doesn't hurt to kick the tires on this and bring this guy in the 90-man because you don't necessarily have to guarantee anything and pay out a huge chunk of money beforehand. So this is definitely an option. But speaking of third down change of pace, guys, Boston Scott is another interesting one that you brought up. You're very big on this one. You like this one a lot. 26, still a young guy. I think the only thing when we talk about this one that I'm not wary of, but I think that makes it a little bit difficult is the restricted free agent tag on him. Mm-hmm. But I think if you pay enough money, a couple $1 million somewhere in there, you may have to overpay a little bit of what his value is. The Eagles would walk away from that.
It all depends on what tender they put on him, of course, as well.
That too.
If they put like a second round tender on him, then this is
because it's like a $4 million.
Yeah, like $4 million. This is a no go. But if they don't, if they just kind of leave him with that restricted free agent tag, then the 49ers could offer something for him. I mean, I'm not saying this is the most likely situation, but you're looking to upgrade. And if you're looking to upgrade your third down back, he's the best. He's one of the best ones to get to upgrade that third back role, because I'm about upgrading all throughout depth. This is one of the things we talked about last year with the tight ends as well, when people are saying, what are you worried about upgrading from Charlie Warner or Ross Dwelley? There are backups. Yes, because you want the best 53 guys you can possibly get. So if you look at somebody and you're like, you know what? That guy's better than our third down back right now. And right now, JaMycal Hasty's playing on third downs. If you can improve off of him, you do it. It doesn't mean that he's a bad player and that you're not thankful for what he does. But whenever you can improve, you do. So I think that he would be an improvement, but a lot of things have to go the right way for that to be able to happen.
You're right. A lot of things do have to go that way, but in regards to what you just said, upgrading everywhere, every position, depth-wise, this would be an upgrade over JaMycal Hasty. And this is not a knock on JaMycal Hasty. Boston Scott is a proven, solid third down back in this league who has come in multiple years now for the Philadelphia Eagles when the injuries have happened, when guys haven't been playing well, stepped up in a huge way, including the year before they got Miles Sanders, where they had injuries all over their running back room and stepped up in a huge way and was their lead back during a playoff push. This is a guy who knows how to play well at this league. He plays at a high level, solid receiving out of the backfield, can run in between the tackles fairly well. No, he's not a big physically bruising guy, but he's shifty. He's got pretty good vision, and he hits a hole quick. And that's a positive in Kyle Shanahan's system. Being a one-cut go guy is a big deal, and Scott can do that. So I think he can have success.
Dynamite in the screen game.
100% dynamite in the screen game.
I mean, he would do wonders for Trey Lance on third down.
You can say that again.
Yeah, he fits what they want to do, and that's why when I'm looking for free agents, I'm looking for scheme fit, and that he's one of those guys. And so, I mean, is it always a good situation going for a restricted free agent? Absolutely not.
No, it's risky.
But sometimes you just wait, you sit there, you play your role. Play like a shortstop, and then you wait. And if it's the right situation, you catch it and you roll with it. So I'm don't know if this is a thing, but I had to talk about it because he's a guy that I feel is a scheme fit, and ultimately would take our third down back to another level.
It does. It elevates it immediately. Yeah. And definitely a scheme fit. And speaking of scheme fit, this is a guy that you and I both like. I wasn't sure if you were going to have him on there just because I know he's going to come a little bit more expensive than some of the guys that we've already talked about, and that's J.D. McKissick out of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just big fans of the Washington backfield overall in general. Antonio Gibson was one of your favorite guys coming out of that draft.
Right.
I have grown to absolutely love everything that he does. And J.D. McKissick is one of the most unsung, unappreciated running backs, I think, in the league in terms of what he does. It's obviously the stature and the size, the lack of physicality that he plays with, but he's speedy. He catches everything. He's incredible in the screen game, incredible as a route runner and a pass catcher. He can run routes deep downfield. He can run intermediate. He can run short. And then he's explosive coming out of the backfield as well. He's placed on IR. He had a neck injury and a concussion in 2021. He's had no long-term real health issues other than that. This is a guy who's been fairly healthy. So, 49ers fans who are always talking about health. This is a guy who's been gosh darn healthy, and it's going to be about 2 years, $5 million, 2.5 per. 2.25 guaranteed is what PFF is projecting, which means only one of those years is guaranteed money, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's an upgrade. Again, JaMycal Hasty, gone. J.D. McKissick, in. I think you feel comfortable with him on third down. Dynamic. I mean, imagine if you had a running back group and a running back room that consisted of Elijah Mitchell, Raheem Mostert, J.D. McKissick, and Trey Sermon. I think you're feeling pretty good about that unit. Like I said, it's all about upgrading. And to me, JaMycal Hasty is one of those positions you need to upgrade. And so I think you have a different dynamic for each one of them too, right? Each one of these guys do a different thing. Of course, Raheem Mostert and Elijah Mitchell can play on third down as well. But like you said, he's a matchup problem for linebackers. You get this guy in the slot, on the outside, catching screens. There's so many dynamic things you can do with him. And that's without Kyle Shanahan even working on some sort of a game plan that can use him and institute him in certain types of sets and different ways that you can use him with Trey Lance. Because now you have a dynamic quarterback with his legs. It doesn't mean you're going to run him consistently, but a couple of times a game and a couple of looks, you can make it a lot easier. And all you need to do is give these guys a little bit of an extra window. That means freezing a defensive end on a read option type look. And J.D. McKissick's one of those explosive guys who has a lot of good movement and really quick. I think he could be dynamic in this offense, but I'm willing to pay $2.5 million a year easy to make sure I have a third down back like this guy.
I mean, I think if there's an area offensively we can afford to spend a little bit more money, it's the running back room. Running back room right now kind of makes sense in free agency to spend a little bit more. Make sure you have that depth. Make sure you have the dynamic pieces behind Elijah Mitchell to do what you want to do with your run game. If you want to be a team that can rely on the run, have running backs that you can count on and are reliable. J.D. McKissick is just that. He's absolutely that and would be a massive upgrade. Massive over JaMycal Hasty. And no offense to JaMycal Hasty. I love everything he does. I love his work ethic. He isn't J.D. McKissick.
No, he's not. JaMycal Hasty is, let's not forget, an undrafted free agent.
Accurate.
He plays good, but we've seen he makes mistakes. He's not the best at blocking. He does okay. But there are areas where he can improve, and really there's areas where the 49ers can improve, and one of them is third down back. So I think that, he's on the clock, and I think they're going to try to find a way. And it could be one of these veteran guys. It could be somebody that they draft. But I think they are looking to upgrade that third down back position.
I don't disagree with you, Ant.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you at all. And now one of your favorite free agents, Ant, the guy that you are the biggest on, the guy that you teased about a week ago in terms of maybe there's a running back in free agency on the cheap that we could get that I would be absolutely great for the San Francisco 49ers. Ant, who is that running back that you're so enamored with in free agency this year?
Marlon Mack. I think Marlon Mack fits the 49ers system. He's a big physical guy, but he's a one cut and go guy. This is a no-brainer. You put him in there with Elijah Mitchell and Raheem Mostert, and I think you roll with those three guys all year. Elijah Mitchell can play on third down, but Marlon Mack is that physical type runner. He is like Elijah Mitchell, where they're Jeff Wilson Jr., and other guys all together. He's had some injuries. That's a concern, but that's the reason he's going to be affordable. You're talking about a guy who showed the potential to run for over 1,000 yards. In fact, he's had a 1,000-yard season. So you add him to the roster. That means you take snaps away from Elijah Mitchell and Raheem Mostert, but that means everyone stays fresh, and that's what you want. You've used him in the certain type of role that he would be used for. I think he could be dynamic in Kyle Shanahan's system. He's one of those guys. He's a patient runner. He finds the hole, but when he gets through it, he explodes in a big way. The physicality I love. But I love the running style. I love the way he handles business. He's a complete back. So adding him to the team would be huge. And I think in that case, you would have two complete backs in him and Elijah Mitchell. And then you would have Raheem Mostert that can absolutely fly. I think it would be one of the most dynamic and well-rounded groups in the entire NFL.
It's really weird with Marlon Mack because everything that's happened with him has not been due to his play. It has been due to injuries. Right? Him being passed on the depth chart is due to injuries and him not being healthy and coming off an Achilles. Just the reality of the situation. And everyone go, well, Cam Akers, Achilles, and he was back. Everyone's different. Injuries are different. They impact everyone differently. Recovery time's different. Rehab's different. Javon Kinlaw had surgery, rehab, and then complications and more surgery, right? There's some people who have surgeries and their body just naturally takes care of itself. I know people who have had knee replacements who don't do barely any rehab and are completely fine within 7 or 8 months. And then I know people who have had multiple knee replacements and done multiple surgeries and multiple stints in rehab and just can't get it right. Everyone deals and recovers from injuries differently. Marlon Mack has had 2 years now after post-Achilles. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove, and you're going to be able to do it on the cheap. And one of the big knocks on him, man, has been receiving. A lot of people think he can't catch the football. He's not a good receiving back. I hate to break it to folks. How much receiving did running backs for the Colts do the last decade? We're not talking about Edgerrin James here. Right? We're not talking about, this isn't Peyton Manning running the offense here. This is a completely different Colts team than we've seen in the past. They haven't put a lot of pressure on their running backs other than Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines has been the only one there that's been the receiving back role, any sort of role in that offense scheme-wise. Jonathan Taylor doesn't even do that much in terms of catching the ball out of the backfield. He does do some stuff, and he makes some plays when he doesn't. But Marlon Mack feels like the type of running back that needs this. He needs San Francisco. San Francisco would be an opportunity to revitalize everything and get him going on the right track. He's 26 years old, and it's going to be about a $1.25 million cap hit to bring him in. This feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and really, when you're talking about Kyle Shanahan's offense, you're not talking about an offense that's built around throwing the ball to a running back.
What?
Except on third down. That's why you always got, Jerick McKinnon and JaMycal Hasty, third down backs that were going to do that sort of thing. But really, it's Kyle Juszczyk's the one that's catching the ball in the backfield as a running back. We've seen Elijah Mitchell utilized a little bit in playoffs, but it's not something that Kyle Shanahan likes to do. It's not something he, does with his team. So I don't think that's a big thing. But I think all the other guys can do it already. So you can bring Marlon Mack in. He could, have sets where he runs on first and second down. He runs in the goal line, takes some of those big, tough yardage plays away from Elijah Mitchell, where Elijah Mitchell can stay fresh. Because I think we all know that if you keep Elijah Mitchell fresh, you keep Raheem Mostert fresh, that's going to be good for your team going down the stretch. Those guys are going to be able to pound the rock at the end of the game when you need it. But it would be nice to have somebody when you get to a 3rd and 1 situation. Maybe Elijah Mitchell's carried it twice in a row. That you can go, you know what? Let's put Marlon Mack in there. He can get us that 1 yard. Right now, your alternative was what? Let's go ahead and let's put in Michael Hasty. No, he's not going to be able to get that 1 yard, and he proved it in the games. He was getting stuffed a lot. But I think adding a more dynamic physical back, especially since you're probably moving on from Jeff Wilson, just makes the most sense.
You most likely are, and that hurts to say. And we didn't bring him up in this because the reality of the situation is with everything that's going on with that knee and what the Niners want to do, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, they could in theory bring him back on a contract, right? A minimum contract to bring him in for a year, but I just don't know at the end of the day.
Well, and the thing is, right, it's about upgrading. It's about getting better. Marlon Mack is better than Jeff Wilson Jr.
As a running back in the league, yes, and what he would be in the system, yes.
Tevin Coleman is a better running back than Jeff Wilson Jr.
Agreed with you.
There's just a lot of options. Phillip Lindsay is a different style of running back than Jeff Wilson Jr., but that dynamics is what you're looking for in the offense.
Correct.
Phillip Lindsay is also a guy that could play on 3rd down, so he's another guy that's a natural fit. I think I would be happy with him or Marlon Mack. I think those are the guys I'm the two most excited about because of the style of running. I know passing game-wise, J.D. Mckissick makes the most sense.
He does.
But I think the style of running, the other guys make the most sense to me.
Agreed with you. I think Phillip Lindsay is probably my favorite running back of the ones that we talked about on that list there. But Cutback Crew, let us know which of these free agents that we talked about you liked the most and what you'd be willing to pay for them down in the comment section below. And no, this is not a wrap-up. And no, I did not forget, Ant, because we have something extremely exciting to talk about. An actual trade possibility for the San Francisco 49ers at the running back room. We talked about it not being Christian McCaffrey, but it is a big name. It's Saquon freaking Barkley, a name that a lot of people wanted the Niners to draft originally back in the 1st round, back when he was coming out. He's had nothing but injury issues, unable to stay healthy, and apparently the Giants have come out and said it's going to take a 4th round pick to trade for Saquon Barkley, Ant. That is a staggeringly low pick. My jaw hit the floor when you pulled it up and told me about it. I pulled up the article. It's like, there's no way. There's got to be like some sort of kicker. It's like a 4th, a conditional can turn into like a 2nd or something like that. No, just a 4th round pick, Ant. What? A 4th round pick for Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I guess that's the consensus. Everyone's hearing that it's a 4th round value for Saquon Barkley. He's going to make $7.2 million, and he's in the final year of his contract. He's his 5th year option. So you have to incur $7.2 million unless you extend him, of course, and you have to give up a 4th round pick for what could be a 1-year rental. It's one of those risk versus reward things. Are the 49ers willing to take a risk on Saquon Barkley? If you strike gold, he's a guy that's absolutely dynamic, 1st round talent, top 10 guy, someone that can change everything for you. And I mean, a 1-2 punch of him and Elijah Mitchell, that sounds pretty good too.
Yeah.
So I think that is something to keep an eye on. Instead of spending money on Raheem Mostert, maybe they would trade for Saquon Barkley. It's something that wasn't on my radar until I seen the price tag. I was thinking it was going to be something around a 1st or 2nd round pick, which I didn't believe the 49ers would be willing to do, especially with a $7.2 million cap hit. And also the fact that it's a 1-year rental. But for a 4th round pick, you're starting to get closer to where I think the 49ers would be interested in kicking the tires, because I know Kyle Shanahan really likes this guy, and he would fit this system. Well, he fits any system pretty much in the NFL. So it's something that's legitimate to keep an eye on. Don't know if the 49ers actually pull the trigger, but we had to talk about it because now it's within the realm of possibility.
100%. And you could do just a 1-year extension with him as well if you really, really wanted to. Him knowing I've been coming off the injuries, all of that stuff. I'm coming into San Francisco. I'm going to do a 1-year extension. There'll be a little bit less money that allows him to space some of it out. But also, Ant, if he blows up and has a huge year with you, but you're still worried about his health long term and being a guy who'd be coming into his mid-20s at that point, still being a viable running back, if you only give up a 4th, you could turn around and deal him for a 1 or a 2 or something like that and get a lot of value back in return.
Well, the good news is if you trade for him and you give him a 4th round pick and he leaves the next year, depending on how good he did, you're going to get a comp pick back. So you're going to get a comp pick back. You could get as high as a 3rd round comp pick back for him. So you might actually get more value than you gave away.
So what you're saying is, Ant, you give up your compensatory 3rd now to get Saquon Barkley, knowing that you're going to get one back the following year.
Oh, you definitely could do that. And you've seen the way that they handled the Trent Williams situation where they gave up a couple picks. And then they negotiated with Trent on his cap number, and then ended up, making the agreement that, hey, we won't franchise tag you.
Yep.
And they could do something similar with Saquon Barkley. That way, if he wanted to go out and test free agency, he would be allowed to. But you would get him on a cheap deal, and when you got a team like the 49ers where you're looking to win Super Bowl, anytime you can add a big-time talent to your football team, you at least got to kick the tires and investigate it a little bit.
You should. They definitely should. And you and I, we even jokingly made the comment, you can maybe give up less of a pick if you were to include, I don't know, a Trey Sermon in a 6th.
Yeah.
You might be able to get someone like Saquon back and not have to give up a big pick. You'd be giving up a running back who has about that same designation value, that 3rd, 4th round right in there in terms of where you took him the previous year. So you give them that, a young running back they can work with, and in return, you get Saquon Barkley and you give up a little something extra.
Last year, Kyle Shanahan talked about the fact that, Julio Jones was out there on the open market. The 49ers really weren't ultimately too interested, except preventing him from getting to other teams. This might be another one of those situations.
Don't let him go. Don't let him end up in LA.
You don't
let him end up in Seattle.
Anywhere in the NFC West, you don't want him to end up, because Arizona would definitely take him.
They would.
Los Angeles, they don't care about draft picks. They'll for sure give it up.
They'll give up 2 4ths and a 7th to make sure they get it.
Oh, for sure. And Seattle would be interested in bringing Saquon Barkley in as well. They're not shy on giving away draft picks either.
Accurate.
And we know Pete Carroll is wanting to turn more to the run game. To me, that would make a lot of sense. So
they'd end up with a 1-2 punch there in Chris Carson and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, so the 49ers, got to kick the tires on this thing and look into it, do due diligence. Hopefully he doesn't end up in the NFC West, and if he does, hopefully it's with San Francisco.
Please let it be in San Francisco. Cutback crew, let us know what you think about that trade possibility in the comment section down below. Does that just get your energy levels up to 1,000? You want them to pull the trigger on this trade right now, and then let's get to OTA so I can see some Saquon Barkley working with the 49ers, or absolutely not, stay away from this man. He's had nothing but injuries. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, let us know down below in the comment section right now. And free agent running backs in the book. Some really, really good names. Some very intriguing options for the 49ers. And if no one noticed, there's a common theme with a lot of these guys. Cheap improvement options at the running back position.
Yeah, definitely. That's what it's about. Cheap improvement. Cheap guys that can help your football team, because ultimately you don't want to spend that much money in the running back room.
No.
You want to spend it in other areas. And when you're about to pay Deebo Samuel $20 million, you have George Kittle as one of the highest paid players. You have Trent Williams, one of the highest paid players.
Eric Armstead.
You know what you got to do. So this is one of those areas where they can't cut. Now, if you were listening to this on a traditional platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, do us a favor. Go ahead and rate the episode and leave a review. That would really help us out.
Absolutely. Review the pod. That always helps promote the channel out and helps us there. And if you're on YouTube, comment away and like the video. Share it as well on your socials. Let everyone know about this wonderful, incredible, fantastical, 49ers content. Fantastical. Okay. 49ers content. It's going to be coming at you all offseason long, all draft long. You're not going to want to miss any of it. So make sure you're here for all of it. And we'll catch you on the next one. And until then, stay safe.
Remember, the right way
is always the 49ers way.